This is a Fatal 4 podcast.
Shuffle those feet from side to side. It's time for Squared Circle Strafe, the premier video game podcast of the Fatal 4 Podcasting Network. I am your host, Pro Wrestling Noah, aka Noah Stewart, and it's time to talk about video games. Welcome in, folks. Welcome into the podcasting zone where I, Noah Stewart, talk to you about the news and goings-ons of video games during this past week. Hope you're having a good start to it, the week that is. I had a pretty fun weekend, did my usual movie watching, try to get my double feature in, successfully did so this past weekend. Went and saw Transformers 1, the new animated kids movie, Transformers movie, which was fine. I would say average. The first half is very much a kids movie, that kind of, the kind of lowest common denominator kind of kid dialogue, like, oh, he's right behind me kind of dialogue going on there. But the second half has like kind of a honestly crazy tone shift where it becomes a much more serious kind of believable origin story of how Megatron and Optimus Prime became the characters that we know them to be. Like in Megatron's like ripping dudes in half, like that part was cool. Not the whole movie isn't like that though. So it's honestly, if you're a fan of Transformers, I would say don't miss it. Otherwise, it's fine. The other movie I saw though, the weirdest double feature ever is I followed that up with what Twitter is calling one of, if not the best horror movie of the year so far, The Substance, which, oh my God, it's horror movies tend to be, I would say on average, around an hour and a half. And that's usually because the thing about horror is that you don't want to stick around too long, because if you do stick around too long, the thing that you're scared of becomes less and less scary the more you see it. And The Substance is like 2 hours and 20 minutes, which sounds insane. But if you're a fan of body horror, Cronenberg, the Society, the true sickos know what that is. Do not miss this movie. And it also kind of has that problem where, and I don't want to talk about it too much. You definitely don't want to go into it knowing as little as possible, but it kind of does the thing that some movies I kind of ding for, where I feel like it's ending maybe like 3 times throughout like the last act. And most movies I kind of ding that as a negative. But in this case, every time I think it's going to end, the movie keeps going and they ratchet up the ridiculousness of its premise another gear, and it gets to the point where I was in a theater with maybe 20 people and we were all just clapping and cheering for what ends up happening in the last 20 minutes of that movie. It is bananas. Go see The Substance, please. Go support it. It's so good. Another thing I did over the weekend was I went to the zoo. I fed a giraffe a leaf of lettuce. People who listen to Fatal 4's flagship podcast, the Didn't Get All of It podcast, heard me talk about that at the beginning of this past week's episode. But I just wanted to mention again, I fed a giraffe a leaf of lettuce, and it was fun. It was also carnival night. There was like popcorn and cotton candy, some carnival games, won a wristband. It was a good time. Hey, the zoo? Go check out the zoo. But that's enough about me. That's enough about news about Noah going to the zoo. How about some news about video games? Let's get into it. We got, weirdly enough, for a week where there's not a press conference going on, which is, I feel like, so far in the very young life of this podcast, has been like the heaviest news weeks have been when there is a showcase going on by a company to announce a bunch of video games, and then I kind of run down all the interesting video games from that press conference. There wasn't one of those this week, but I still feel like there was a lot of news to cover. So let's get into it. The first thing that actually I think this article came out the day that last week's episode dropped. So this is some not, super fresh news for when this episode drops, but EA released new details for its next Battlefield game, which I believe does not have a code, or it does not have like a subtitle yet. I think it's just Battlefield or Battlefield Project. But the current overseer of the Battlefield franchise, Vince Zampella, who you may know from Respawn and Infinity Ward, he was a co-founder of both of those developers. The guy who brought you Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Titanfall. So a guy who knows his way around the modern first-person shooter. He is now overseeing the Battlefield franchise, and they're saying that they are looking to cut down the scope of the Battlefield multiplayer experience. Before, in the most recent release, which is honestly is a game I kind of forgot existed, which was Battlefield 2042. If you put a gun to my head before I read this article and told me, hey, what's the most recent Battlefield game to come out, I would have maybe said Battlefield 1, which was the one that was set in World War 1. But no, they did Battlefield 2042, which was a future set Battlefield, which apparently came out in 2021. So it has been a while since we've had a Battlefield. But that one had a 128 player matches, which is kind of a crazy, that's a huge amount of players to be in one game, which is very impressive. But I think the scope is maybe a little too big to have compelling matches. I think they're maybe stretching themselves too thin. So they're now looking to cut down that scope by about half and going back to 64 player battles, which is still a lot. And I think is kind of where Battlefield started. I was a big fan of Battlefield 1942 back on, when it was just a PC franchise. And Battlefield 1942 ruled. I had so much fun playing Battlefield 1942. I only barely touched Battlefield 2, which I think is the other fan favorite from around that time. Remember when net cafes were a big deal? You would go to a place that just had a bunch of gaming computers, and you would, rent out time to play on the gaming computer in a LAN with your friends, and they would have a refrigerator with Balls energy drink. You would all drink Balls while playing Battlefield 2 or Counter-Strike or Line Tower Defense mod for Dota, or for Warcraft 3, which is also where Dota came from. But anyways, so they're looking to cut down the player number for this, which I think is a good move. Because if you were to think of kind of what is the current landscape of big AAA competitive first person shooters, I think Battlefield has maybe kind of lost some of its place in the zeitgeist. I think most people these days think obviously Call of Duty is top dog, still is top dog. It's still the top selling game every single year. Which I actually think was dethroned last year by Hogwarts Legacy of all things. But then besides Call of Duty, you think of what, Apex Legends or Fortnite, which are, not really the same thing as these kind of more military focused kind of deathmatch style first-person shooters instead of Apex or Fortnite, where it's more battle royale focused. And even Call of Duty has its own battle royale now. So I don't know. I feel like maybe Battlefield going back to this 64-player deathmatch situation, have more curated maps, smaller, more curated maps to kind of have more going on instead of big expanses. But I think 64 players is still enough where you can have all the different vehicles that Battlefield is known for, like jets and helicopters and tanks and stuff like that. I think there's still enough space to kind of utilize those vehicles. So I don't know. I think this is a good move. It's a good smart move for the next Battlefield game. Speaking of EA, they also put out a little something. This is coming from Eurogamer.net, saying that The Sims 5 is not happening as you would expect it, because they are moving, as EA is saying, beyond linear sequential Sims releases. So instead of putting out a thing that is called The Sims 5, they are instead going to like update and keep supporting Sims 4 with, you know, more content and maybe even like a visual overhaul update to that game, which I think is, again, a smart move from EA, which is not something that, you know, in the grand history of video games, you see EA making the smartest decisions. But I think this is a smart decision because if you remember, when The Sims 4 released, people were kind of pissed because it may have looked better, but they had supported The Sims 3 so well. And when The Sims 4 came out, it was missing a lot of the stuff that people were already used to and loved about The Sims 3. And even some of the stuff that came later for The Sims 4 was stuff that you had to buy that was kind of already with the base product of Sims 3. So Sims 4 had a rough couple, like about, I would say, I think about a year of its release where people were just really not happy with the product. And as they added more and more to it, people, you know, eventually accepted The Sims 4 and is now kind of like the de facto base experience for The Sims currently. So I think this is a really good way to make sure that those players are still happy, the base of players that are still investing a lot of time into The Sims. And yeah, it's just this will, and it's smart to, you know, keep updating it. And I guess in a way, kind of like World of Warcraft, I think is probably how they're going to approach it, where they will update it visually, still have kind of the same guts, but give it a new coat of paint. And hopefully that will, you know, like freshen it up for players to stick around but not feel, you know, burnt or left out in the cold. You know, kind of a two different ways of saying that, but to make sure that they are satisfied and still happy and not feeling like they are, you know, being taken for a ride by not having access to all the features that they're used to having in their Sims experience. A little more EA news here. I didn't even do this on purpose. I just lined up all these news stories up this way on accident. EA has said that Skate, if you remember Skate, the skateboarding simulation experience from EA, they are having it go into early access next year. So people who remember Skate, it is where Tony Hawk Pro Skater is a kind of more arcadey, combo focused game. Skate is a little bit more of a like kind of true to life simulation of skateboarding, not like super hardcore, but more so than Tony Hawk, where you are manipulating the board with the thumbsticks, and like instead of, you know, hitting X to do an ollie like you would in Tony Hawk, you're actually like, you know, like kind of crouching and loading the jump by holding the right thumbstick down and then popping it up to like slide your foot across the front of the board to do it, to pop an ollie. And so that game, there are a lot of fans. People love that game. Thank you, Tyler, the creator, for having the lyrics "Skate 4" on Igor, 2020 album Igor, helping bring get EA's attention to bring Skate back, and it's not officially titled Skate 4. They're saying this is kind of a reboot for the franchise, and it will, I believe in 2022 they said that it would be free to play, which has some people kind of nervous, but they are hoping that this will be an authentic evolution of the series where skateboarding and gaming is in the real world, says them, according to this Eurogamer.net article. So that'll be going, free to play, early access next year. I'm looking forward to it. I love skateboarding games, and I had a lot of fun with the Skate franchise. So be on the lookout for that next year. One more little bit of more EA news. Here we go. Look at me, all lined up and organized like this. EA has said that Respawn is developing the final chapter in the Star Wars Jedi story. So Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. If you remember the kind of Souls-light Star Wars experience starring Cal Kestis. Apparently, Steg Asmussen, the director of both those games, he says in this article from VGC, Video Games Chronicle, he says that he had always intended it to be a trilogy, and he apparently left Respawn last year after launching Star Wars Jedi Survivor. He left Respawn last year and has since formed a new studio. But he had always intended for the game to be a trilogy, so it's nice that the studio is carrying on and doing this. And I believe this is a very successful game for them. I believe both Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor sold very well for them. I think most people would agree that it is kind of the best franchise of Star Wars video games in a long time. I very much like and enjoy Outlaws, and there's another person in this video game or in this podcasting network that also likes Star Wars Outlaws. I think probably even more than me. But I need to play more of it. I think he just texted me today, said that he beat it. That boy's a gamer. But the Star Wars Jedi franchise is having its last entry, which I think is also good, like maybe a little bit of restraint. I mean, a lot of video game franchises have trilogy. Some even go beyond. But I think it's good. They're saying like this is the final chapter so that the story can, have a good conclusion to it. Maybe not get too, long in the tooth. Which I think is also good because the Jedi story, I mean, I haven't played Survivor, but I did play Fallen Order. And I do think that even not just amongst Star Wars video games, but like Star Wars, the franchise as a whole at the moment, I think Jedi is like just Fallen Order from what I played is one of my favorite Star Wars narratives like recently. Like I just think that the story of Cal Kestis is very cool and like has some unique stuff happening, especially for like I'm usually the guy that is way more interested in Star Wars narratives these days that don't involve the Jedi, but I think what they do with like the Force and the Jedi as it applies to Cal Kestis is very interesting and cool. So good to see that they are bringing this third game out and bringing the story to its conclusion. Speaking of video games that are coming out in the future, this one coming out very soon. They announced they being Off-Brand Games and Ether Studios have announced a sequel to the platform fighter fan favorite Rivals of Ether. They're releasing Rivals of Ether 2 on Steam this October 23rd, which people who know Rivals of Ether, I think I've talked about it on this podcast before. Very popular, very good platform fighter. Think Super Smash Brothers. I think Rivals of Ether kind of paints itself after Super Smash Brothers Melee the most. And that game was a almost like 8-bit kind of even like Game Boy aesthetic to it. Very simple graphic style, but very tight platform fighter action gameplay. And Rivals of Ether 2, according to this YouTube trailer that they put out, looks way more polygonal. They actually, the art style looks really sharp, and like it has a very cartoonish look, but it doesn't, look like, some polygonal indie games can maybe look a little cheap sometimes. The quality here looks good, and I think will even more so help feel more one-to-one to the platform fighters that it is trying to emulate, because all the Super Smash Brothers ones are 3D polygonal. So I think this will be a good move for them, and I think the platform fighter fans have a lot to look forward to. Here's a Sony block of news that we're heading into. Sony says that the PlayStation 6 will reportedly include AMD chips for backwards compatibility. This is good news because apparently for the PS4 and the PS5, it also had AMD chips for the CPU and the GPU, which helped a lot to ensure that it will retain backwards compatibility, which I think means that it will be able to play both PS4 and PS5 games, which is good, seeing as how PlayStation is not always the best at, honoring its legacy in such making games available to play. At least like the library of games that you already own, because they love re-releasing games and making you buy stuff again, which they are not alone in that. Nintendo loves doing that too. But this is good for people who already have a curated digital library, that they will still be able to most likely play those titles on the next PlayStation hardware. Which, again, and this is, it is their fault, but it is like the PlayStation 3, I believe, will still have a lot of issues being brought into the next generation because it had that like cell processor architecture, which is apparently just a huge headache to be able to, the games that run on it only run on it, and it's hard to bring those games forward to run on newer hardware, so that will still be a problem. But the new thing will have the same brand of chips that the last two consoles have had, so it'll most likely be an easy transition. Speaking of new consoles, PlayStation has also announced their 30th anniversary collection for the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro, which will include PlayStation original PlayStation, like PlayStation 1, but not the like PlayStation 1 O in E second model of that console that came out. But the PlayStation 1 original gray aesthetics for the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro. It also, if you get the bundle, it also comes with a PlayStation DualSense controller with that color aesthetic as well, with the colored face buttons, which is just, it looks so good. Oh, it looks so good. They're also putting out a PlayStation Portal with the same color aesthetics, and it also, this is kind of silly and unnecessary. It comes with cable wraps that are like the green, red, blue, pink of all the face buttons, and I think it's a sticker and a paper clip that looks like the PlayStation logo. And honestly, the kind of one of the coolest things about this whole setup is it comes with USB-C cable to connect the controller to the system, but the end that goes into the system looks like or the end that goes into the console looks like the big fat controller plug from the original PlayStation controller. God, it looks so good. For me personally, maybe not so good as to, buy a whole new PlayStation just to get, this like very nostalgic color aesthetic. But maybe it works well enough for me to get one of those controllers. I really, really do want one of those controllers. We'll see when that comes out. I believe launching pre-orders will start, this says September 26th, and the collection will be released on the 21st. So have a little bit of time to get that in. Speaking of PlayStation, they have also said that their next State of Play broadcast will be coming this coming week as of the dropping of this episode, which I think most people who know in the industry are reporting that they will be announcing the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster, which, the crowd goes mild for that. Because I don't know. I feel like the opinion on Horizon Zero Dawn has kind of cooled since it came out. I played and really, really liked Horizon Zero Dawn, but I feel like there's this weird sentiment of people saying that it's just like a very mid game, which I would say it's way above average. I really, really like and enjoyed playing Horizon Zero Dawn, but it is, there is already a really nice looking version of it on the PC. And that game already looks really nice. I don't know if we really need a remastered version of it, but I think this also plays into what I've said on this podcast before, kind of the classic playbook of Sony remasters being lined up with other different versions of media that they've slotted that IP into, like when they did The Last of Us Part 1 coming out around the same time that The Last of Us TV show on HBO was happening. And I believe there is a Horizon Zero Dawn TV show coming soon, so they will probably do the same thing with this Horizon Zero Dawn remaster, so that people who watch the show and go, oh, hey, I really like this show, I want to know more about Aloy, and maybe play this video game, like, oh, it's based on a video game, let me go play the video game. Then they will have a new $70 product that they can go and buy where they can, play the first century of the video game. So not saying that I love it, I'm just saying that it makes sense. But hopefully that will not be all that is, announced there. I think there is still maybe some more details that they can do about the Lego Horizons, like the Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon-based Lego game that they have coming out soon. We still need to hear about Bungie's Marathon, which, speaking of, that leads directly into this next news story. Apparently Bungie is saying that for Marathon, when it does come out, they are targeting it to be a $40 game, which, is something that Sony has been doing a lot with their kind of live service games. And it really worked out earlier this year for Helldivers 2. And it really super did not work out for earlier this month released Concord, which, I've talked about on this podcast how much of a disaster that was. And so I don't know. I feel like it really worked for Helldivers, maybe because it was a kind of more unique live service game in that it's a PvE game, and one that you can kind of play on your own if you want to. It's a lot harder, but with Concord, the big problem there was that it was the genre of game that it was in was already had a game in the same genre that had seen a lot of success and was still like, there were games still releasing in that same genre that were also seeing success, and it was just like a little too late to get into that zone, which makes me very nervous about the prospects for Marathon, because from what I've heard and what I've seen, Marathon is seemingly going to kind of slot itself into the Apex Legends genre of battle royale, where it's a battle royale, but it's like, squads of 3. And I don't know all this for sure. This is just from what I've seen and heard. They could have more details about it during this state of play coming. But I think also another thing that is helping Marathon is that for Concord, the art style and like kind of everything surrounding that game looked very generic and unappealing, I think, to most players. But Marathon, from at least the trailer that they've dropped, it looks very sleek and way more unique than kind of what everything else in the same genre is doing. So I'm not saying that a $40 price tag is like a death sentence for this thing. I think its chances will be better than Concord, which I know is not a high bar, but we will see how that works out for them. And I assume we'll maybe get a release date for it during this coming state of play. And then, speaking of Concord, we got a few more details on some explanation for how disastrous this launch was for it. Reportedly, this game cost $400 million to develop. Now, to put into context, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 from Insomnia cost like $321 million to develop. And when that came out, like when that statistic came out, people were saying like, oh boy, that is a crazy huge number. And I think that game spent like something like 5 years in development. Now, if you remember, Concord spent like 8 years in development. So you can kind of understand how that number got so high, because it spent so much time in incubation. But that is still, for how hard that game crashed upon launch, that has got to look so bad to shareholders, and like whatever statistics come out by the end of this fiscal year. I am nervous for people who work at Sony. I mean, they've already, done some layoffs at Bungie, but that is a rough statistic to put out there. And maybe as a response to this, it appears that Concord's director has left the studio. Ryan Ellis has told staff at Firewalk Studios last week that he would no longer be serving as game director on Concord and would be instead stepping down into a support role. This is according to a Kotaku article. So yeah, kind of to be expected after a game, comes out and crashes that hard, but things not going so great over there. But why don't we, hey, let's recalibrate. Let's take a break, refocus. Let's take a quick ad break. And when we come back, I have some more news here, and we'll see what that's all about. See you in a sec. All right, folks, and we're back. And let's get into what I think is probably one of the heaviest stories of this past week. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are suing Palworld developer Pocket Pair. I believe that's the name of the developer. Let me see. Yes, Pocket Pair. This is a big deal. If you remember Palworld, the survival game where you capture little Pokemon-like creatures and then put them to work to like building structures and doing assembly line work and also shooting them with guns is a thing. I remember the trailers for Palworld. People were like, is this a real video game? This feels like it's not a real video game. And they came out and people were like, huh, it's a real video game. Weird. So that game, I think a lot of people were kind of like elbowing Nintendo. Like people who were not fans of the game were like, hey, like this thing sure looks a whole lot like Pokemon. Are you going to do something about this? And I think at the time, it took like, I think about a week of people doing that. And then Nintendo finally put out a statement that was like, we will be considering investigations into this whole Palworld situation, which at the time, I think people saw that and were like, that was just kind of Nintendo's way of saying, all right, we get it. Everyone shut up. Like, we know it looks like Pokemon. Everyone shut up. Stop bugging us. But as of now, it seems like they were maybe... So Nintendo has a history of being extremely aggressively litigious. We know this with the various ROM hosting sites that have gone down in recent years, and some of them having to do with people basically being indebted to Nintendo for a life sentence, like owing millions and millions of dollars that they could not ever in their lifetime with the salary that they make dream of paying Nintendo back. Some people, I think, spending time in jail because of hosting ROMs of Nintendo games. So Nintendo is not shy when it comes to legal practice and making examples of people. So I think like it took Nintendo a while to, I guess, get their ducks in a row to bring the hammer down on Pocket Pair. Probably because Pocket Pair is like a big, especially now after the success. If you remember, Palworld was huge when it launched. Wild success for them. So they are now a company that has money and can maybe invest in defense lawyers of their own to combat Nintendo, which apparently they have. They fired back and said that they are not going to lie down for this. They have a statement here that says, regarding the lawsuit, yesterday a lawsuit was filed. This is coming from Kotaku, by the way. Yesterday a lawsuit was filed against our company for patent infringement. We have received notice of this lawsuit and will begin to appropriate legal proceedings and investigations into the claims of patent infringement. At this moment, we are unaware of the specific patents we are accused of infringing upon, and we have not been notified of such details. Pocket Pair is a small indie game company based in Tokyo. Our goal as a company has always been to create fun games. We will continue to pursue this goal because we know that our games bring joy to millions of gamers around the world. Palworld was a surprise success this year, both for gamers and for us. We are blown away by the amazing response to the game and have been working hard to make it even better for our fans. We will continue improving Palworld and strive to create a game that our fans can be proud of. It is truly unfortunate that we will be forced to allocate significant time to matters unrelated to game development due to this lawsuit. However, we will do our utmost for our fans and to ensure that indie game developers are not hindered or discouraged from pursuing their creative ideas. We apologize to our fans and supporters for any worry and discomfort that this news has caused. As always, thank you for your continued support of Palworld and Pocket Pair. Now, this is interesting because Nintendo is suing for patent infringement, which I think is where this whole thing gets a little yucky, because when they filed for lawsuit, I think most people assumed that it was going to be under copyright, because the art style of Palworld looks so much like Pokemon. Like, just, it looks like they really almost one for one ripped off the art style of Pokemon and just made new character designs with them. But instead, they are going after patents, which they have not. And I will get to one specific thing real quick after saying this. They have not been totally clear on which patents that they are going after here. And this kind of, the reason why this feels yucky is that it kind of sets, and, you know, Parker Paris said as much in their statement, that this kind of sets a bad precedent for game development going forward. If, you know, if after we know the nature of these patents that they're going after, if this goes through, kind of make things a little weird and difficult for game development going forward. If people remember, the WB Games release of Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, and the Nemesis system that game had, where, you know, you would go fight orcs and you would kill a leader, and then another orc from that clan would take its place and become the new leader, and you would have, they, you know, would have like stats depending on, you know, if you encountered them, or you would, you know, fight a dude, and if you got pushed back and had to flee, they would be emboldened by that experience and become stronger. That whole system, the Nemesis system, that they filed a patent for that, which I think made people, and they claimed that was, they were not discouraging people from using that system, but it's very much like, you see that thing has a patent and people get scared too. That there's a reason why you have not seen other games replicate the Nemesis system. So that being said, there has been, since the announcement of that lawsuit came out, I believe this was on Friday, Eurogamer found some more details about what potentially at least one of the patents, of which there are multiple that they are claiming have been infringed, is the use of a Pokeball, basically, is one of the patents that they are going after. So apparently this patent that Nintendo, the Pokemon company, has for this was submitted in June of this year, like over the summer. And they like accelerated the review process of that, probably in preparation for this legal action. But the patent says that it describes how a character catches a Pokemon by aiming and throwing a capture item like a Pokeball at a creature. Upon successful capture, the creature then becomes owned by the player. And that is in Palworld. There is a item you craft called a Pal Sphere that really looks like a Pokeball that you throw at creatures to then capture them and have them be owned by the player. Which is, and they apparently, the patent attorney, a Japanese patent attorney that spoke to Yahoo Japan and was translated by Automaton, that this Eurogamer.net article is referencing. He says that it's a killer patent. This lawyer being Kiyoshi Kurihara. He says that it seems like it would be hard to avoid if you want to make a Pokemon-like game, and it's easy to infringe if you're not careful. Which, there have been like other like Pokemon-like games that have done capture mechanics that didn't involve throwing a ball at a creature. Like if you remember Cassette Beasts, which had like, little cassettes instead of balls, or even Shin Megami Tensei, which is, I'd say, probably the other most popular, monster taming, game in the genre, does not have, like stuff that you throw at creatures that you just like befriend them, but through conversation, and they become part of your team in your Pokemon like party, except they're demons. But yeah, so that this will be interesting, and I don't know how much of this will be public, seeing as how it is, a lawsuit between two companies, and we'll see, if maybe people settle. Pocket Pair does say they want to fight, so this will be interesting. I will be interested to see if details come out about what those other patents are, because if this Pokeball thing is true, like this, it could be worse. It could be worse as far as like patents that other developers have to be scared about infringing, and kind of what that means for, litigious game development going forward. But that was a pretty heavy, story there. So let's finish off the news for this week with some lighter fare. Netflix had their Geeked Week celebration, where they announced some new shows based on video game IP coming to the streaming service, of which are a Splinter Cell series that is being made by them and Ubisoft Animation, which we don't know a lot about yet. I think there was just like a teaser trailer for it, but Splinter Cell animated series sounds cool. They're also doing a Tomb Raider series, Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft, coming very soon, October 10th, which is apparently, it's set in the same like continuity as the recent Tomb Raider games, what with Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And it is set after the events of that they call that the Survivor trilogy. So that is coming very soon, next like less than a month away. And then for next year, they announced they actually showed a trailer for a new Devil May Cry series, which I'm pretty excited about it. And it's also coming from the studio that brought you the Castlevania series on Netflix, the very successful Castlevania series. So that's exciting. There has been Devil May Cry anime before, but I think people are not huge fans of it. So seeing this like new high quality product for, a Devil May Cry animated series sounds very promising. And then probably the biggest thing coming out of all this is that they finally showed a teaser trailer for a new Cyberpunk series based on the, Cyberpunk 2049 game from CD Projekt Red that is being worked on by Netflix and CD Projekt Red. But the concerning thing here is that they did not mention Studio Trigger, which is the studio that brought you Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which was the last very successful animated series on Netflix for Cyberpunk. And they apparently Cyberpunk Red has said that they do not have plans to continue the Cyberpunk Edge Runner story going forward. So, not saying that this new thing will be bad, but man, Studio Trigger is so good that I'm there for pretty much anything they do. Studio Trigger, if you don't know, they did anime series like Kill la Kill and Little Witch Academia. They co-produced Darling in the Franxx, which a lot of people don't like, and is kind of one of my guilty pleasures. I know that it's not very good. Anime freaks, I'm talking to you. I know it's not very good, but I still think it's fun. There's things I enjoy about it. I know it's not good, but the character designs and the robots, they look neat. 2B is best girl. Or not 2B. Damn it. 02. Numbers and letters. The girl with the horns. Don't Google. But, and of course they did Cyberpunk Edge Runners. And this year, very successful on Netflix, Delicious in Dungeon. So maybe they're busy with that. Who can say? But yeah, so some exciting anime coming from video game properties. There you go. And then some more fun news. This is not necessarily something that I had to. This is not news that needs to be reported, but is news that I wanted to report it because it is a fun kind of intermingling of things that I am interested in. Metaphor Refantasio has announced that they are going to sponsor a Haas F1 driver during the Singapore Grand Prix. So what that means is the Haas team, one of their drivers, Nico Hulkenberg, will have a Metaphor Refantasio logo on his car. So shout out to my fellow video game and F1 racing freaks out there with the streams are crossing. Anyways, let's finish off the news for this week with one more fun bit of news and a new video game announcement. Sega has unveiled a new Like a Dragon game, and it is Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Now, what this is, they showed a trailer for it. What it is you got Goro Majima, who is kind of the very maybe comedic relief, fun dirtbag character of the Like a Dragon / Yakuza franchise. Dude with the eye patch for people who just kind of see these games on the periphery. And he's heading to Hawaii and he's going to be a pirate, which also I think is kind of funny because I could maybe say that Goro Majima is kind of like the Jack Sparrow of the Like a Dragon Yakuza world. And funny enough, he's going to be a pirate. And they've also said that and you can see from the trailer, that the gameplay is not going to be quite the same as previous Like a Dragon games. They're saying it's not an RPG and it's not a spin-off, or it's not an RPG like recent spin-offs. It is instead going to be an action-adventure title. And in the trailer, it looks, like maybe more of a character action, like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta type game, which I think for what it is will be a lot of fun. And it's, that's that kind of what makes the Yakuza Like a Dragon franchise so great is how they are kind of willing to pivot into different genres and different ideas for what they kind of want the franchise to be. And also different settings and even timelines like they did with Yakuza or I'm sorry, Like a Dragon Ishin, doing feudal Japan stuff with their characters. And I think kind of what I don't know if they've said, but I assume that Goro going to Hawaii is maybe a way to use a lot of the assets that they used in Infinite Wealth, which also takes place in Hawaii, so they can kind of accelerate the development of this game. But yeah, so be on the lookout for Majima being a pirate in Hawaii. That's nuts, but I'm sure it'll be a blast. And also in this VGC article, they're also pointing out that Like a Dragon Yakuza also has a live action series coming to Amazon Prime later this year. So I'm sure they're kind of trying to time things out that way. So lots of exciting, fun stuff to look forward to if you are a Like a Dragon Yakuza fan. So that's all the news. That was a big news blitz. Big, lots of big saucy news there for you this week. But why don't we take another break? And when we come back, I will tell you about some of the video games I've been playing. See you in a bit. And we are back, folks, and it's time to tell you about some of the games I've been playing this past week. And friends, your guy has been gaming. I have a nice healthy handful of games to tell you about here. As the same as last week, I have been still playing a lot of I Am Your Beast and Astrobot. Been continuing to play those. I Am Your Beast is still very fun. I am kind of similar with Astrobot 2. I'm kind of slowly making my way through that game. I love it to death, but I'm trying to kind of savor it. And with I Am Your Beast in particular, I am kind of slowing down to get the extra bonus objectives that you can do in each level, and really trying to unlock some of the other challenge levels by going back and getting S rank on previous levels, which some of them are really hard to do. I've spent a decent amount of time just trying to get S rank in some of those earlier ones, really, kind of slowing down my, overall progress in the game. So I think maybe as I'm thinking about it now, I think what I might do is just kind of try to do my best to go against my my instinct to go for all the extra stuff right now, and maybe just go through the narrative of the game, actually go and see credits, and then I can go back and get those unlockables, maybe unlock some of those challenge levels. So I think I'm going to end up doing that, but it's still really fun to shoot a gun at dudes and then run out of ammo with that gun and then whip it in some dude's face and then catch their gun out of the air and shoot more dude. It's God, I Am Your Beast is a blast. Definitely, if you haven't checked it out yet, go check it out. And then Astrobot, also still having a lot of fun. It is just such a delight to play. I have now beat the second boss. I am well into the third level. Also, there's one level I have to shout out here real quick. If you don't want spoilers for Astrobot, maybe skip ahead by a minute. But there is a level in that game. It's I think one of the unlockable levels after you beat that second boss, where it throws you into a whole level that is based on God of War, the recent God of War Ragnarok, where they give you Kratos' axe, and they introduce a whole mechanic where you hit the triggers to throw the axe at enemies, and then it freezes them and you can recall it back. And it's basically like the mechanics in God of War, which is super cool. I was not expecting that depth of, they're constantly introducing new fun mechanics in that game, and then just dropping them for a new fun mechanic in the next section or next level. But that was just a granular level of detail in a mechanic that I was not expecting. It was just such a delight to play. Still Astrobot's still so good. And then some of the newer games I've been playing this week. Let me tell you about a recent release, an indie title called Elsie. It's from developer Night Shift Games and published by Platonic Friends and H2 Interactive. And I will disclose that I received a Steam key for this game. So I've been provided this game by the publisher and developer. But I will also be honest and say that this was kind of a game that I already had on my wish list and had seen in showcases over the summer, and was already kind of keep having my eye on. So thank you to the publisher and developer for that copy. But I will say I'm about 2 hours in, and I am enjoying it. It's if you don't know, it is a roguelike action platformer, and the style of it, it's like, very, 16-bit, the kind of the traditional, side-scrolling action game, indie game kind of style in that regard. But it models itself after, like, mechanically models itself after, I would say, the Mega Man franchise, maybe the Mega Man X franchise to be specific. You play as a robot girl named Elsie, who was created by a Dr. Gray, wink, wink, Dr. Light from Mega Man, obviously. I think is interesting is that, so Dr. Gray invented, these, robot masters that, help with infrastructure and whatnot. I think in this case, it's like global warming, I think it was like climate control is what the robots were attempting to help with. But then, they all went rogue, and she created Elsie to fight them. And so it is, and so it takes all those Mega Man X style mechanics and turns it into a roguelike. So you are now doing, procedurally generated runs in, various formations of levels. And I think that part of it is very fun. I am very much enjoying doing the runs, kind of getting better. The progression, I think, is really solid. There's after you do a run, there's always a nice little bit of housekeeping to do in the hub area, where you're going to talking to people and handing off resources to then either unlock new weapons or kind of unlock some more options for while you're in the runs, like some upgrade stations, or what they call bonfires, which are like little rest areas in between like larger sections of the runs, where there will be like a little vending machine that you can do some healing at. And one bit of criticism I will say is that it kind of takes a little bit to get going. The way that they choose to do the tutorial in this game is they will kind of do like one layer of mechanics that they will kind of walk you through, whether that's like, hey, here's how the parry system works, and then they'll just let you do the rest of the run. Like, they just like go and do the rest of the run unfettered, like, we won't bug you, just go play the game. And then you die in that run, and you come back and start a new run, and then they'll do like another, here's how dashing works in this game. So I thought that was kind of weird that they did not like fully prepare you with all the mechanics that you should know about before, like, actually like attempting runs. I think you have to do like about 5 runs before the tutorial is actually like complete, before like they stop bugging you with like what, how certain mechanics work and like what certain buttons do. So I don't know if maybe that could have been done a little bit more elegantly. I was like just like a little bit confused as far as like, okay, like what can and can't I do, and like what am I supposed to like do with some of these resources, what and whatnot. So I will say like that was like kind of a little weird, and kind of didn't quite rub me the right way. But now that I'm in it, it is a game that I find myself thinking about and wanting to, like go back to and play. It's especially, I spent some time with it on my Steam Deck as well. It's a very, very good Steam Deck game. That will probably be where I spend the most time with it. And, I feel like most people should have, if you like roguelikes, you should have at least one roguelike that is kind of like your go-to at any given time. Like, oh, like I only have like, 20 minutes to play a game. Let me do a run in LC real quick and, just like see what's what, and then, go about with the rest of my day. So it's a really good one of those. I'm really digging it so far. I will continue to play it. Maybe tell you a little bit more about my experience with it on later episodes of this podcast. I have gotten to the second boss. I don't know how. I mean, I think obviously there's probably 8 robot masters. I would assume, given the Mega Man-ness of it. But Elsie, go check it out, folks. I'm if you like roguelikes, definitely consider checking out Elsie. The other big indie game release that actually came out this past week that I've seen a lot of people talking about, and I had my eye on this thing. Also, a game that was featured in various showcases over the summer. UFO 50. This is a game coming to you from Derek Yu and other developers. Derek Yu being the lead developer of Spelunky, indie hit darling Spelunky. And what this game is, it is actually a collection of 50 games. And usually, like, in the context of indie games, when you would say that, you would think like, oh, so it's like a WarioWare kind of game where it's like 50 like mini games that you kind of like rapid fire through. And the answer is no. It's every one of these 50 games in this collection are all complete experiences. Like it, if you kind of remember back in the day, you would see, you'd be like going through Walmart, you go to the PC section, you would see those CDs that are like, 100 games and on one disc. And then like you'd bring it home and it'd be, like crappy Tetris and crappy Pac-Man and, just like weird ripoffs that like none of the games were actually worth it. This is like the opposite of that, where all these games are actually very, very worth it. In the kind of narrative surrounding this big collection of games is that it imagines a 8-bit system. I believe it's called the LX. It's kind of like, imagine like the Amiga, or like, I guess like the Apple II, something like that, or the Commodore, like a video game system that is like kind of a monitor with a system built into it. And as you are looking through this library of all these 50 games, which you have access to at the very beginning of the game when you launch the game out of Steam, and you can organize them in any way you want to, alphabetically, chronologically. I've been going through them chronologically, and you can look at the descriptions of the game, and they will tell you like, oh, this was released in 1988, and like fictionally, obviously, in 1988, and it was developed by this team during like office hours, or like this game was developed as the first game to take advantage of the chipset in this system for like background scrolling or whatever. Like it'll just have like fun little details like that. And as far as my time with the game goes, or collection of games, I have played the first 5 chronologically. And I'll probably just kind of like nurse this game like that, and just kind of like, check out a handful at a time, and maybe as an excuse to play a handful of them and talk about them on this podcast. I think they're all very cool and very interesting. The first game in it chronologically is this game called Barbuta, which is very archaic, I would say, which I think is like, very astute in like, if you look at the kind of 8-bit era of either like those 8-bit PC games or the NES. And this kind of reminds me of a game like Wizardry, where you play as a little knight character, and there's no soundtrack in the game, and it's all just like bleep bloop sound effects. And you're this little knight character. You don't run very fast. You have like a little hop for a jump, and you have a like little sword attack. And like that's the other thing, is that all the games are 2 face buttons. It's D-pad and 2 face buttons, like a proper NES game should. And so you have like this little pokey sword, and the combat I would say it's not a good feeling game. Like, if you go back and play Wizardry, the platforming doesn't feel amazing. It was a very archaic, very early release in, the NES. But I think that's just so novel and fun to kind of intentionally have, that level of, what would be development history at that time. It's interesting. And I've seen some people on Twitter like actually go through the trial of beating it. I don't know if I'm actually going to do that. I played through, I would say, like maybe 20 minutes of it. It's basically enough time for me to lose all my lives and go back to, the start screen. I was like, okay, I think I'm done with this one. So like not an amazing time with it, but a really like fascinating, interesting time. But I then played a game called Bug Hunter, which is a kind of strategy game where you have like a whole, like at the bottom of the screen, there is a whole bunch of different options you can do, like move your character a certain space. And you're a kind of space dude with a gun, and you're hunting bugs on the moon. And it's a grid-based strategy game where you can move a certain amount of spaces, or shoot in a certain direction, or lob a grenade. And you're trying to get these energy cubes around the map as you are shooting at these bugs. And the energy cubes are also volatile in that if you accidentally shoot the energy cubes, it'll blow up, and it might cause a chain reaction that blows up other cubes, and you might end up killing yourself because the chain reaction ends up having an explosion come at you, and then you die and the game's over. But the interesting thing is that as you go through rounds, you can then spend currency that you have accrued by shooting bugs to replace actions at the bottom of your screen with other actions, like filling parts of the map with more energy cubes, or you can extend the range of one of your attacks or something like that. It's a really like interesting and engaging strategy game, which is like neat for what is apparently like the second game developed for the system chronologically. The third game I played was a game called Ninpek, which is a kind of like, if you remember Ninja Kid, radical Ninja Kid from the NES. It kind of reminds me a lot of that, where it's a, very simple side-scrolling game where you play as a little ninja boy. You have a little double jump and attacking enemies. It's all, feudal Japan style. But it's an auto scroller where the level is constantly moving to the right. But it's weird because, like, when in the auto scrolling levels in Super Mario Brothers, let's say, and you would be running to the right as the level is moving right, you would then stop Mario's momentum, and Mario would then be moving leftwise on the screen because you are moving still, right? Well, in this game, if you hold the D-pad still, your character is still scrolling to the right as the level is scrolling. So like that part feels a little weird, and you have to like kind of adjust your brain for that, because if you play, like side-scrolling action games on the regular, that's maybe not something that you're used to. So that part of it I thought felt interesting. But isn't a game that I, totally loved. Aside from that, is like a pretty standard side-scrolling action game. There's a game called Paint Chase, which kind of remind me of if you ever played Rally X, the Namco arcade game Rally X. It's kind of reminding me of that, where you play as a little F1 car, but it's like if Rally X was also Splatoon, because you are in these little enclosed levels, and the rally cars leave a trail of paint behind them, and you are trying to paint as much of this arena as you possibly can, while there's also other cars coming out of these little spawn points that are also painting the little track arena here. And you can run into those cars and eliminate them, but they're constantly spawning out other places, and you're trying to meet a threshold of, I think it starts at 50%, and where I think end up dying was like either 65 or 70% of the stage you're supposed to have painted by you. And there's other like power-ups, like you can, little boost pads where you can speed up, or you can pick up a little paint gun to, snipe dudes from the other side of the map. There are like little like closed off sections of the map that you have to hit a switch to open up, so you can go paint that and then close it off. It's a little interesting game. I thought maybe I, kind of met the threshold of what I was kind of able to handle in it a little quick. I feel like the difficulty of it ramped up pretty quick. So that was, again, not a game that I spent a ton of time with. But the last game in the collection I did spend time with was a game called Magic Garden, where you play as a little girl, and there's a evil witch that is cursing your garden, and so it's a grid style map area, and you are this little girl, and you're running around in like orthogonal directions, up, down, right, left, and you have to collect these little slime creatures. Think like a Puyo in the puzzle game Puyo Puyo, little slime creature with little eyes, or maybe if you're familiar with Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, then it would be like a jelly bean from Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine for the Sega Genesis. And you're going around picking these guys up, and then there's little star patterns on the ground where you are then supposed to go and leave these slime creatures in to score points. And then there are bad slimes that you might run into that will then end your run. You're also not allowed to run into the walls of this arena, or it will end your run as well. But I don't know, the mechanics of this one felt really fun to me. Just like the precision that you have to leave the slimes on that, the little star area, and it's constantly changing. It kind of feels like Snake with more stakes, if that makes sense. I don't know. It's kind of a harder game to maybe explain, maybe when you have to kind of see in action. But that was one that it was that Magic Garden and Bug Hunter were like the two games I kind of walked away from my time with UFO 50 this round. That I felt like, these are fun. I could see myself going back specifically to play these games. So, yeah, UFO 50. That's just 5 out of the 50 games in this collection, of which there are so many different genres in it. Like there are, like action platformers. I've heard there's a roguelike somewhere in here. There's a complete JRPG, which seems nuts. Like, I'm also wondering how many of these games, because, a lot of NES games of this vintage tended to be, if they were like action games, they tended to be around like 2 to 3 hours. But a JRPG, like that could be anywhere from like 15 to 20 hours. I don't know. So I am interested to see kind of what the depth of some of these later games will have. So UFO 50. If what I've described to you sounds interesting, definitely go check it out. Apparently this game was, in development for like 8 years, having developed all 50 of these games that are like all, complete experiences. So yeah, that's the games I've been playing this week. And I feel like I have run out of time to do a strafe shuffle this week, so I will leave it at that for this week, folks. But thanks for listening to Squared Circle Strafe. Leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. You can follow me on twitter.com @OozingNeon if you want to catch more of me talking about some real nerdy stuff. You can follow the Didn't Get All of It podcast to hear me and the rest of the Fatal 4 hosts talk about the latest and greatest in professional wrestling. You can also sign up for our Patreon to get exclusive access to our Discord, as well as bonus content and the satisfaction of supporting independent podcasting media. Head to patreon.com/Fatal4Pod. That's Fatal, F-O-U-R, pod. And speaking of the Patreon and bonus content, we also recently on this week's Didn't Get All of It announced that we would be releasing a new $5 tier for the Patreon, where you can get bonus shows that are related to this podcast, specifically Squared Circle Strafe multiplayer, where you can hear me and a guest. Most likely the first couple will be Paul, where we are talking about going more in depth about certain video games and maybe certain other topics. So if you like the show and you want more of it, consider subscribing at the $5 level. Again, head to patreon.com/Fatal4Pod. That's Fatal FOUR Pod. Thanks again for listening, and as always, enjoy your gaming.